Glock perfection. Glock's been around for a number of years, and I have owned Glock since the beginning. I had a Glock 17 that I started out with, the first gen, the first year they came out. And I've owned Glocks ever since, have a number of them. Do I know everything about Glock? No, I don't, even now. Does my taste change for different firearms? Yes, they do. And I have a lot of different firearms that I really love and enjoy shooting. But it just seems like the Glock is so reliable, so consistent, that I just love the Glock. I know how to shoot it. And I've shot Glocks stock for a number of years. But because Glocks have been so popular, there are a number of additions that you can do to your Glock. Now, I have done a couple of ultra custom Glock reviews. One, the Salient Arms Glock, which is an incredible pistol, really built more for competition. Also, I recently did the Wheaton Arms competition packages and tactical upgrades. And I did get a lot of flack from those videos, which is fine. I don't mind that. But one of the things that I know personally is that I don't know everything. And neither do the people that are making a lot of these comments. But you know what? That's their opinion, and that's what the comments are for. There are some things that I typically do to my Glocks. My Glocks are not race guns. Most of them look exactly like this Model 20 that's sitting here in 10mm. Just a basic Glock with a few things that I like to add. And so I'm going to show you the few things that I like to add to my Glock just to put it a little bit more above board than what it typically is. Is anything perfect? No, and neither is the Glock. Can you shoot a Glock out of the box well? Yes, you can. I've been doing it for years. But here are just a few things that'll make life just a little easier for the Glock owner. Now, one of the things I always do with my Glocks is I end up putting one of the grip frame inserts immediately in my Glock. And the main reason is because there's a cavity that rides right here behind the magazine well. And I like just to go ahead and fill that spot. Not only does this keep debris out of the pistol, it just seems to keep this smooth, and I just like doing it. It's a fairly inexpensive thing to do, and I've just installed it. There's a couple of different companies that make them, and you can just choose the style that you want. There are different types for different pistols. The next upgrade is I like to replace the connector. It just lessens the trigger pull a little bit, it tightens it up, and this is a Lone Wolf 3.5 pound trigger. I typically put the Ghost rocket in many of my guns, but this is so easy to install. Over the Ghost rocket, there's some adjustments and some what you have to do in taking the connector in and out. I just love the Wolf because it just goes straight in, and we're going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to install it. This is not a biggie because I typically don't use a slide release that often, but this is an extended slide release. This is a Glock original part. Instead of this really flat slide release, it has a very small little shelf on the end. Gives you just a little bit of something extra when you're dropping your slide. Now, breaking down the pistol, and if you're cleaning or doing any modifications, grabbing this small slide lock can be a little bit of a trick. If you do it quite often, it's easy to do. But one thing I like to do is to replace it with one of these trapezoid slide locks from Brass Stacker. This is a really neat, it just extends out just a little bit, and it makes it really simple to get a hold of that slide lock. And last but not least, I replaced my guide rods with a steel guide rod. They're polymer. You know what? They're going to hold up. I've never had any problems with the polymer recoil guide rod. But what got me started replacing my polymer recoil guide rod springs is when I had a Gen 4 that was having some issues because of the recoil guide rod. Once I replaced it, I didn't have any issues. Just because of the reliability and the durability of the steel, I like it. Plus, it gives it just a little bit of extra weight. And if you're using these in a tactical or self-defense situation for home defense, weight isn't really a big deal. So I really like to add the stainless steel guide rod. Of course, the first thing we're going to do is make sure the pistol is unloaded, and it is. And we're going to break down the pistol. And of course, pull the trigger, pull it back about 1/8 of an inch, and drop your slide lock, and then just pull the slide forward. We're going to remove the recoil spring and the barrel. Now you're going to need 3 tools. You'll need a 3/32 and a 1/8 inch punch, or you can use the regular Glock tool. and a small screwdriver or a small pocket knife. Now, when removing these pins, there are 3 pins to remove, and when removing these, you do not want to use a hammer. So we're going to start out with the 3/32, and we're going to remove the locking block pin. This is your locking block, and here's the pin. And I have one of the small steel nylon bases here we're going to use to push this pin through. Next, we're going to remove the trigger pin. And there's a little trick to it because you're going to need to probably just move your slide release lever just a little bit to let this work through. Just push it through, and if you need to have any movement here, you'll know it, but just go ahead and push through. You may be able to get it. There we go. Goes right through. There's your trigger pin. Next, we're going to remove the trigger housing pin, and we're going with the 3/32 there. Goes right through. Pull it right out. Now you're going to want to go ahead and remove your slide stop lever, and then take your small screwdriver and get under the locking block, and it'll just kind of pop up. There we go. Now take your ejector and go ahead and pull it, and the whole trigger housing will come out. Now take your trigger arm, and if you'll notice, one side is in a little slot. So we're going to take it forward and twist it, and it comes out. Now there's a spring that is attached to, and you can actually leave it in this position without removing the spring, or you can remove it off the spring. But the main thing is we want to get this connector off. So you want to take your screwdriver, just barely wedge it. It actually fits down in here, so get toward the bottom and just lift up. No big deal. This is your 5.5 pound connector, and we're going to replace it with a 3.5 pound connector. Okay, we're going to insert the Lone Wolf connector. Really easy. It just goes straight in, and then it fits down flush right here. Now you want to bring your trigger bar back, pull it forward at an angle, and then it slides right in that slot. Now you're back in business. And we're just going to go ahead and return it into the frame. There we go. Now to remove your slide lock, which is very simple, there is a leaf spring right here, and that retains the slide lock. So what you're going to want to do is just depress it down and then turn the frame sideways, and it drops right out. Now below is the factory slide lock, and now we're going to replace it with the trapezoid slide lock. And you can see how it comes down to an angle. This allows for you to get your fingers on the tips and bring it down. Now when inserting your slide lock, you're going to want to make sure you have this little groove at the bottom. That's where the leaf spring is going to fit. So you're going to want to just place it barely in the side, not enough to impede your spring. Push down on the spring and just push your slide lock all the way across until you hear it click. Here it goes. Now you're in business. It protrudes just a little bit out, but because of those recesses, you're not going to even know it anyway. But it makes a world of difference when breaking down your pistol. Okay, we're going to return the locking block. Now the extended slide release lever slips right down beside the trigger. And if you see that little spring, we're going to be looking at that in a minute, because we're going to need to depress that down below the locking block pin, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But just go ahead and slide it in, get it into place. Now we're going to reinstall our trigger pin, and we need to take care that we adjust the slide lock lever as we do it, because it's going to have to go through the hole in the end of the slide lock lever, and then it goes straight through the trigger. And just pushes it right through. There we go. We're also going to go ahead and replace the trigger housing pin. Just make sure that it's even on the back of the grip. And last but not least, the locking block pin. We're going to just place it. Now I come under the locking block to get to this spring. And you can see it's being depressed right here. You push that down and then push the locking block pin. If you're not careful, the spring can get on the top of the pin. You want to make sure that it's under the pin. Just push it into place. Try to make sure that it's fairly even, that there is somewhat of a little bit of a recess. And even on both sides. Now the frame portion has been completed. Now on the recoil guide rod spring, Steve at Brass Stacker said that for the 10mm Model 20 to go with a 20-pound recoil spring. He said that's what most of the guys are using, so I said, hey, you're the expert, so we'll go ahead and just reinsert the barrel. I also went with the polished steel, so at the end of the barrel you'll see that it'll have a polished finish on it. You have to specify Gen 3 or Gen 4. This is a Gen 3. Fits right in. Have your nice polished stainless on the end. And then we just return it to the slide. Now we're going to function test, pointing it, of course, in a safe direction. Good stuff. The trigger pull is much better. This trigger pull on this Model 20 was awful with the original connector. So changing it to the Lone Wolf connector really made a big difference just immediately. That is an easy way to improve your trigger, which of course will translate into better accuracy because you'll have better control over your trigger. And then we'll check the trapezoid slide lock. Man, that just comes really easy to grab. Now one thing I'm going to show you that has happened to me a couple of times just when I was in a hurry is when I'm putting the slide back on the frame, if you're not careful, there's enough play that you can ride over these back rails and then you're locked in. But because the trigger hasn't been actuated, you can actually bring it down, just like you're going to break it down again, press your slide lock, and then pull it right off. Just be careful to make sure you hit those rails every time. So these are the 5 modifications that I like to make to my basic Glock pistol. And it makes Glock perfection just a little more perfect, at least in my world. Is this going to dramatically improve my shooting with the Glock pistol? Probably not a whole lot, but it will continue to give me a little bit of an edge in different areas. And I always keep my parts just for a rainy day, just in case. Now one thing that I don't really consider an upgrade, but yet it is if you're buying the pistol, is to have factory night sights on the pistol, especially for a home defense pistol. And I really like the night sights for that reason, because typically if you're going to have a problem, it's usually going to be at night. So having good night sights is just a good option. But no matter what you do, make sure you get plenty of extra magazines and good quality ammunition. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. And anybody that says a good trigger job on a pistol has no effect on accuracy really doesn't know what they're talking about.